We're going to call the meeting to order. Mrs. Logan, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bitter. Here. Mr. Comerford.
Here.
Dr. Steger.
Here.
Mrs. Weiss.
Here.
Mr. Ballard.
Here. We're mixing things up a little bit this morning. We are going to go into executive session prior to our public portion of the meeting, and we'll do that. But first, we have a special guest here, Leslie Combs, who is retiring at the end of the school year. We will deal with, we will vote on her retirement. Choice of words, sorry. You're in our personnel consent agendas, but she did want to come talk to the board, and she has to get back to school. So, Leslie?
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you today. I obviously come with very mixed emotions, but I come with a grateful heart, and I just wanted to have an opportunity to.
You're right behind the camera. Yep, there you go. Yep, there you go.
Part two, take two. But I just wanted an opportunity to say thank you to a lot of people. It's just interesting that I'm sitting here by Dr. James, who hired me for the role of principal at Blue Ash Elementary. And I look around the table and I see some faces that I have known since I started my career here. And then new faces that I'm just getting to start to work with. And I have to tell you that I know how blessed I have been. And I thank the board for that. I thank the people that I've worked with, whether it's been for many years or just briefly. I just feel blessed. And I wanted you to know that we are not a perfect district. We're not there yet. And I don't know that nobody ever is. But the amount of work that we put into every single child, I've never seen anything like it. And I've worked at several places. I've just not seen anything that matches this. And I am so proud to be a part of that. Chad, I wanted to also tell you before I leave the floor, a huge thank you, because you are the quintessential leader. You listen to everything that is shared with you. And I know some of it is challenging to hear. People feel very open, and I'm talking all staff members, not just administrators, feel very comfortable telling you how they feel, and you hear them and they know that. I know that you and the board have to make some very difficult decisions, and I just so appreciate the fact that it's always the children and the people that surround those children that are the number one thing in your mind when you make those decisions. So thank you for that. I will miss that greatly, but I'm just very appreciative. So thank you very much for the love, the support, and the guidance, and the trust with these darling children. So thank you.
Mr. Fallon, if I could, just because when I look at Leslie Combs, I see the model leader that we all strive to be.
Mhm.
And that is not just myself and the people on this team, it's our building leaders, it's our assistant principals, and it's aspiring leaders in our district. Leslie's the person that I can pick up the phone and call and ask questions to and get honest feedback through difficult decisions and say, how's the building gonna feel about this? And I've lost two of those people recently. One to, an unfortunate tragic passing, and then, one to retirement. And doesn't mean I won't pick up the phone and still call you to get those pieces of feedback and find out what's going on in your life. But Leslie, you will leave a huge gap in our leadership team that I'm not sure we can ever replace it. We can just hope to find people that can have that same passion and energy and dedication to children that you have. And the way you've carried yourself through so many years and some of the most difficult times in our district, you've always been that person that brings us back together as a team and says, hey, we can do this if we all stick together. So, I will need to pull every little bit out of you between now and the end of the year so that we don't leave that gap, but
I'm not going far.
just really appreciate everything that you've done and how you've led Blue Ash Elementary. It's funny that you're sitting next to someone
I know, I love
that
that.
also led Blue Ash Elementary.
I know, right?
It's kind of like the passing of the
Yeah.
torch. So I know that we will find someone that you can pass the torch to and be proud of to continue to lead that building in the way that you both would desire. So thank you for your service.
And Leslie, on behalf of the board and the community, thank you. You know, when I look back at my interactions with you, you're always very honest, open, and vulnerable, but always keeping in mind what the kids need and how the staff, what the staff needs to support our kids. So thank you for everything you've brought to the district, and thank you for, you know, always helping the board really understand what's going on in the elementary buildings.
I'd like to echo what Paul and Chad said. Thank you so much, Leslie, for your leadership. It's so clear and so apparent when I talk with the families, and that specifically from Blue Ash, how much you mean to them and to their children. And you always have put children and the students first. And I really have appreciated the opportunity to work with you. And so thank you and congratulations.
Yeah, Leslie, congratulations on your retirement. I'm so excited for you. And thank you for opening Blue Ash up to me for math night and multiple student achievement days when I would come. And it's just so apparent, you know, walking around with you and going into classrooms, the respect that your teachers have for you, and you knowing what's going on in classrooms, and students just running up to you and you knowing every single student's name. I mean, that is very impressive. And your contributions to this district have just been invaluable. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you for all your service to our district and I hope that you enjoy your retirement. We will be sad to see you go, but happy for you that you're able to. Thank you.
I have to be the last one, so everything's already been stated, but thank you so much and always having a kind heart when you approach everything. That's the other one I will add on to the echoes here, is you've always had a kind heart with everything, and that has been much appreciated around the district, so thank you. And you have a great retirement, and hopefully we see you soon.
Now she has to go lead donuts.
If you want to.
I'll be there.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay, I need a motion to go into executive session for ORC 121.22G1 to consider the employment and compensation of a public employee and the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee. ORC 121.22G3, enter an executive session to confer with an attorney, public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are subject to pending or imminent court action, and ORC 121.22G5 to discuss matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes.
So
Second.
Sitter. Aye. Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Dr. Steger.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
So we'll enter into executive session and then we'll continue the public portion of it following executive session.
Are we leaving?
Thank you, everybody. We're coming out of executive session and we'll start the public portion of our meeting. Please stand and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we get started, I'd like to remind everybody of our district mission and vision. Our mission is to create a culture of academic excellence, inclusive and innovative learning opportunities for the whole child. And our vision is to empower all learners to reach their full potential in a globally competitive world. I need a motion to approve the agenda with an amendment to add item J to superintendent's agenda, which is to authorize Brad Lovell, Director of Business Operations, to execute a change order with Monarch Construction pending SHP's approval of a settlement agreement at an amount not to exceed $2.65 million for the junior high construction project. And we will also enter back into executive session at the end of the meeting And that will be for ORC 121.22 to consider the employment compensation of a public employee and investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee. And ORC 121.22G5 to discuss matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes. Are those the only two, Mrs.?
There's also under personnel consent agenda, classified exempt, need to remove Catherine Hoffman from that. She was actually, that's a repeat from the last meeting, so we just need to remove that.
So I need a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
Mrs. Logan?
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford,
Aye.
Mrs. Wise,
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye, the amended agenda is approved. I need a motion for the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Logan and Ashley as well for a quick turnaround on the minutes as we had a special board meeting on Monday. Any comments or corrections on the meeting minutes? Mrs. Logan?
Dr. Steger,
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter,
Aye.
Mr. Comerford,
Abstain.
Mrs. Wise,
Abstain.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye, the minutes are approved. Any public participation, Mrs. Logan?
I did not receive any.
Thank you very much. Moving on, I'll hand it over to Mr. Lewis for our first presentation.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have our group. This team is a phenomenal team of educational leaders that really have worked really hard to plans towards an implementation of a structure that is really important to the success of our students. So I will turn it over to Mrs. Tompkins to introduce the members of her team and get you started with this presentation. So thank you to the team for all your work on it.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Our core MTSS team is here to share information about our framework. I wanted to take a moment to spotlight our MTSS specialists. Lindsay Haig is our K4 MTSS specialist, and Darnicia Jenkins, our 512 MTSS specialist. They have been integral and imperative in moving the work forward. And from where we were even a year ago to now is tremendous work, really based on the support, the expertise, the knowledge of these two extraordinary women. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Spencer to begin the presentation.
Great. So if you remember from our October retreat, Becky and I tried to give some foundational information regarding MTSS. Although we were split in different groups, we tried to coordinate those presentations to give you a little pieces that we wanted to start to build that foundation. One thing that we want to make sure that our language includes is MTSS is not a thing. You know, it's not an initiative. It's not a thing. It's not something that students go to. You don't go to MTSS. MTSS is a framework. It's a system of supports that we're putting in place to make sure that we are cognizant of student outcomes regardless of a student's need. So that could be remedial, that could be strengthening their understanding of core content standards, or it could be enrichment. MTSS isn't about, just catching kids up. It's about making sure that students are growing wherever they are with whatever they need. Our definition of MTSS is just really kind of captures what it is. It's a proactive and preventative framework that integrates data and instruction to maximize student achievement and support student social, emotional behavior needs from a strengths-based perspective. It includes all students, regardless of category, label, subgroup, whatever, all kids. And our goal always is to improve student outcomes. Essentially, MTSS is really the framework of how we are organizing our resources to the work to have this system for students to access what they need. Our resources include our staff, our curriculum tools, our intervention tools, our enrichment tools. All of that is part of MTSS. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the why and the how. And to start us with the why, Misty's going to lead us through a student example.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm gonna kind of walk you through what a teaming structure that the framework would support for us to be able to respond to a student. So I'm gonna talk a little story about a student, and then I'm gonna coordinate with Christian back here on all our clip. All right, so we're gonna say we have a student and her name's Madison. Madison has decent grades, but needs to be more engaged and sometimes seems unfocused in class. Because Madison is unengaged in school, her student team came together. So this is the student, this is her parents, this is her family rallying around her with the teacher at a student teacher conference to talk about why she's not putting forth her best effort in school. They'll look at her progress, they'll look at a report card, they'll look at her academics, behavior screening data, and also her social needs. Then we have what we would consider our classroom team, which is not an official team, but this is really where we acknowledge the work of our teachers. They're delivering that tier 1 instruction. They are the first line of defense for all students to make sure that their needs are being met in the classroom. Sometimes this could include a co-teacher in that class, but this is really where that teacher really looks at, is my tier 1 instruction meeting the needs of that child? So that's who would come next. Then we have grade level teams and departments that work to bring consistency across the content, collaboratively solve problems, and look at how we can move towards continuous improvement. They're focused on improving outcome for all students. They're reviewing both academic and PBIS data to identify students who may need support or extension. They share strategies and support each other when students are not making expected progress. Madison's teachers share the challenges that she's encountered in the classroom and how she's been intervening. She then leans on the expertise of her team members to address her instructional strategies in order to reach Madison. This grade level team uses flexible grouping to provide tier 2 support, so Madison was able to access support from another teacher to continue to move her forward. Next, we have school leadership teams. They meet regularly to discuss student and building needs. They focus on tier 1 support and implementation, but they also oversee tier 2 and tier 3 work. They take a broader look at the needs across the building. They collect and analyze data. They play a vital role in communicating the outcomes of the MTSS system. They complete fidelity checks and make sure students have access to tier 1 and 2 supports. This team reviewed building-wide data and look at the gates that move students through the intervention cycles. Madison's student support team, along with several other students based on the criteria, may be able to access additional support if their data indicates. So next we have that student support team, and they're meeting regularly and they're talking specific about student need. Before we were looking at a broader view of the school, now we're looking specifically at what is it that Madison needs to reach her full potential. So they're looking at her academic data, her behavior data. They're talking to the team. This team has established norms. They're monitoring and adapting the tier 2 and tier 3 system to meet the needs of the students that they have in that given year. Therefore, this team looks at Madison's scores to determine if she's appropriate for tier 2 or 3 intervention or extension. They will then monitor her progress and continue to make recommendations for Madison based on her data and her progress. Lastly, we have the district leadership team. This team supports the work of the school leadership teams in each building to ensure that they have what they need in order for their tiered systems to work. They review district data, they make sure that there's a unified vision and that the MTSS process is implemented with fidelity. They also discuss systemic needs and ensure that all students, including Madison, needs are met in and outside of the classroom. And this cycle continues over and over. And this is a cycle that we apply not only to our students who need intervention and support, but also our students who need extension, and then all of our students who fall in between.
So as Mrs. Spencer and Mrs. Belfram outlined, you can see that this system and structure requires a high degree of alignment and organization. So we need to make sure that at all aspects, at all layers of this teaming, not only are the adults organized, they have the materials, the resources, the communication, and are looking at data along the way. MTSS is a framework. It's how we organize. So when we start thinking about what are the components of that framework that is going to help us to organize, then we look at these components. And this becomes the basis of our framework. So when we're constructing our framework, we are considering these 5 categories: a tiered delivery system, team-based leadership, continuous database decision-making, comprehensive screening and assessment system, and selection and implementation of instruction, intervention, and supports. This is where our MTSS framework work really begins. Unpacking these categories and starting to determine our framework and our organization. We'd like to take just a moment and dive a little bit deeper into each of these components.
The first component of the framework is the tiered delivery system, and our goal is to develop a responsive instructional framework that meets the needs and assets of each individual student. We do this by having an aligned curriculum, instructional practices, interventions, and supports that move along a continuum. This continuum is known as Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Mrs. Belfram referenced that continuum within her example. Tier 1 represents the universal instruction that we offer to all of our students. Tier 2, though, represents the targeted interventions or extensions that we provide to some students. And Tier 3 represents the more intensive extensions or interventions that we offer to a small population, ideally 1 to 5%, who require more individualized planning.
So the next component, team-based leadership, really gets into the importance of having a structure of teams within an MTSS framework at both that student level as well as the district level, as Mrs. Belfram demonstrated in her story. Within these teams, there's going to be representation from many different stakeholders with different levels of expertise. And then at that district level, the part of the work is making sure that there are to remove barriers, any barriers that would get in the way of making that framework come together. And so the other work would be things like coordinating and aligning the work of MTSS so that the work becomes scalable rather than siloed and having separate systems. And then also just making sure that the work is sustainable over time. The district level would also build capacity so that the work can continue to be organized within this framework. Including things like creating district-wide processes, K-12. It would include things like organizing the work of any professional learning that's associated with MTSS, as well as communicating out to all levels of the system what that work looks like. And then also this idea of continuous improvement throughout that system of MTSS, making sure to come back and check our measures for fidelity to make sure that we are implementing what we said that we would implement.
When we start talking about continuous database decision-making, the first priority of that is looking at both systems level data and student level data. And we want to make sure that we have alignment with that. So you want to make sure that when we talk again about those resources and supports at tiers 1, 2, and 3, that if we intend to be looking at data around apples, we're actually looking at data around apples, whether that's at a district level, a building level, a grade level, or a student level. So there's an emphasis on making sure that the data is rich and the data is accurate and reflective of what you're actually trying to analyze. And that's exactly what you do is within this framework, you're gathering data, you're analyzing that data, you're evaluating it, again, at a systems level, and then also all the way down to that individual student level. So if we take that example that Misty gave, in each of those circles, there's relevant data that those teams or individuals or components within would be looking at to evaluate effectiveness. And again, we're looking to make sure that we are viewing the whole child. So it's not one single moment or one single data point in time. It's looking collectively at the whole child academically, behaviorally, as well as their social and emotional learning.
This next component really talks about the importance of creating a coordinated system of assessments, again, for the entire district. And so this component really gets into what assessments will be given, when they'll be given, why they are given, and then how will those results be used. This also it's as Lisa talked about a little bit for students, but as well as that entire system of MTSS. And on the student side, a variation of measures that would include formative and summative to assess the effectiveness of our programming, but then also those universal screeners that help us to understand which students are at risk. From then we would have diagnostic measures that would help us pinpoint the areas in which we need to intervene, and then also progress monitoring so that we can see if we're making progress, but then again also assessing the effectiveness of those interventions that we put in place. And this is both for academics as well as non-academic areas. Some other features of that assessment system would include, again, professional learning for our staff and how to administer those assessments and then how to read that data. And all of this would be documented in some sort of a plan so that we can continually go back to this plan and it's all just there in writing. Again, that piece of continuous improvement is still prevalent throughout our assessment system. And then as well as making sure that we have some fidelity within our assessment and how we're utilizing those.
So the last component is the selection and implementation of instruction, interventions, and supports. What this component really seeks to do is to say that we have a framework that is supporting a complex system that is intending to positively improve student outcomes for all students. So what needs to be in place in order for that framework to be efficient, to be effective? What gaps and redundancies may already be within our system that we need to look at and potentially eliminate? This ensures that teachers have the professional learning in place, the materials and resources. This ensures that the structures and systems of the schedule of the building organization are in place to have the stretch to implement that MTSS framework. This also ensures that the coaching, support, materials, and resources so that that full capacity of that MTSS framework can be implemented with fidelity and that we have the capacity to say with confidence, our framework is going to function within our system. So as you can see, this is a very complex system. This is when we're saying this is a 5 to 7 year process. It really is with all of that alignment, but that doesn't mean that we haven't started that work already. So we would like to share just very quickly, where are we and what's some of the work that we've done within those components right now?
For the teacher delivery system, our course of study work ties directly into this component. And as we look to adopt resources both in ELA and math, we are taking into consideration that alignment across tiers and how we support students within their universal instruction, but then provide targeted intervention or extension as needed.
For the team-based leadership component, we have started partnering with an organization called NERN that is rooted in implementation science and that helps us define any practices that we are working through. And then we have created a team based on that work with NERN, an MTSS leadership team, which includes everybody up here, Stacy Spencer, Christian Long is on that team, Kelly Wagner is on that team, and we have, did I leave anybody? We have some builder principals also on that team.
For database decision making, you saw the teaming structures that Misty referenced in our student example. We're working on developing what do those teaming structures look like at each level, and then also looking at decision rules. How do we identify those students who are needing extension, and how do we identify those students that might need intervention?
And then for the comprehensive screening and assessment system, we have some things that have already been in place, but we're continually building upon those things. So with our universal screeners, the use of Acadians in our K-4 buildings as that universal screener, again, to help us determine which students are at risk. And we have plans to scale that up to both green school as well as the junior high. We dabbled a little bit in that, but we're working through that. PBIS rewards is our system that we use to document discipline data, and that is K-12 at this point. So we've been doing a lot of work on that. And then of course we also have MAP that we use K.
And then finally, with the selection and implementation of instruction, intervention, and supports, we've begun to identify and implement materials and resources that support our tiered delivery system. And certainly within our course of study work, our tier 1 materials and resources are the bedrock of our MTSS framework. We continue to identify what is the professional learning and the in-building support that's needed as we continue to grow our understanding of our MTSS framework. And then what current systems do we have in place so that when our MTS framework is developed fully, that our building systems, our district systems are able to have the stretch and the capacity to ensure that that framework can be implemented.
Becky, just because I know you're at the end, so I'm going to jump in with my
Please.
question. So that's what you get for studying. Two questions. One, because I think it's always on everyone's mind. Is this new? Is this something new in education, new for Sycamore? And what's the biggest challenge as we work through, obviously, where we are now to where we want to go? And that's to you or anybody on the team.
And if I could also just add on to that one also, I think the public would want to also understand how the curriculum review has also been playing a role in this for them. I think that just tying those together would be helpful for people.
So let me just start from just that curricular perspective. So the challenge with this is alignment of systems. So what the MTSS framework seeks to do, as well as the course of study, is to ensure that from a student's perspective, beginning in kindergarten and moving through high school, that they have aligned experiences and they have aligned opportunities for experiences, both for enrichment and for intervention as well. So what that means is it means change, right? So right now we have systems that are misaligned. So we don't have this common framework that's tying our 4 elementaries and then that elementary experience to bring to the junior high and high school. So that is a challenge in and of itself. To be able to put these systems in place that have the smooth alignment, to provide the communication around the why of how that and why that's important for students. Because remember, the MTSS framework says that we're looking at that child, maybe the child's currently a 1st grader, but we're also projecting and looking at that student as a 5th grader, as an 8th grader, as a high school student. So being able to say we are not only teaching students at our grade level, but we're looking at that child in the entirety of their experience, which means that it's very important for a 2nd grade teacher to understand what's occurring in 8th grade, what that experience is going to be, and for an 8th grade teacher to really understand what are those prior experiences. So that is definitely a challenge as we align systems, is aligning that perspective, even within the classroom, within buildings, to really see the importance of how that alignment is going to have a positive impact. And so of course the study work definitely seeks to do that. And that's part of our tiered delivery system as well, knowing the importance of core instruction for meeting the needs of all learners. The one difference between MTSS and RTI is RTI was that response, it waited for a child to have issues and to fail. So a child had to have significant problems within their core instruction before those interventions kicked in. MTSS says we can make a big difference within our tier core instruction. That we can, by using our data, we can start to identify where are those areas of concern and do something immediately within the core so that those gaps don't widen. That requires, again, those professional learning pieces, materials, resources, and alignment that's in place. Remember, we're talking about not only academic behavior as well, and not only intervention, but enrichment. So, and all of those pieces we're not there yet, but those are all of those components that we're looking towards. Of course, the study says if whatever's happening in core instruction, if we have intervention in place, then that intervention needs to be mirrored within tier 1 within core instruction. So it's not something completely different, but the instruction or the intervention that students are receiving in tier 2 or tier 3, that they're able to apply it immediately into tier 1. The goal is to accelerate student learning. So we don't want to keep them at their present level, so differentiate to them where they are. We want to be sure that we're providing them experiences to accelerate the learning so that we can get them as close as grade level as quickly as possible for improved student outcomes for the highest best.
When you asked Mr. Lewis, is MTSS a new thing? It is not a new thing in the world of education. It stands for multi-tier systems of support, so it is not a new thing, structure, if you will. Again, it's the way in which districts are organizing their processes, their systems to provide those supports for students.
And then the challenges, can you also answer Mr. Lewis's other question about challenges that maybe he asked what was new, if it's new, that was, you answered that, then can you also answer the second question, which was, are there any challenges that you see with that? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was waiting for the answer.
Well, one of the things I think that will speak a little bit to your question is, I think for our school district, one of the shifts that we're making is MTSS is really an integrated system. We historically have had very strong, very robust intervention academically. That was one system, and very strong and robust behavioral intervention. And sometimes those systems did not talk within a building because it's two different teams doing two different work. Yeah. One of the biggest things that we have seen in the research, in our book studies, and the work that we've been doing, even looking at our data, that there's a significant cross-section for a lot of students, that when academic needs aren't met, there's behavioral needs. Or when there's behavioral needs, there becomes academic needs because they have less access to education. Parsing out which causes which is very hard to do. So one of the, there's a lot of research about using an integrated approach so that we're looking at that student holistically, not only their academic needs, but also their behavioral needs and those social emotional needs, how those tie together, and then determining what's the best way to intervene in all areas that's sustainable. So when you look at what some of the challenges are, I think one, integrating those systems is a challenge. Because now we're looking at how do we pull the right people to the table? Do we have all the resources and materials we need to intervene on every side and at every level? So then we have to look at the resources, and then you also have to look at the capacity. And then how do we most efficiently use the staff we have to respond to all of the needs of the students to make sure that we are educating that whole child. So pulling those systems together, having the right supports in the right places, and having a system that can respond and be nimble, because the need may be here one year, it may be here another. The need may be more math heavy, more literate, like there's all those pieces that we have to be able to manage. But then also we have all the legislation that keeps bubbling up that says, now you have to do this. So then how do we do that with for our kids? How do we make sure that requirements become what's best for kids? And that's by folding it into a system that is responsive, that can say, yes, we hear you and we're going to incorporate those things. Then how do we make sure that every child has equal access, irregardless of situation, irregardless of school? How do we make sure that all behavioral and social emotional needs are met? Because we know if they're not available for learning, we can't move them academically. So figuring out how to create a sustainable system that can meet all of those needs and pull those pieces together, I think is the challenge that we are facing. I think we have a lot of great people at the table to respond to that, and we'll get there. But doing it in a way that's sustainable is also what we're being very cautious about, because we don't want to build something that will break down in a few years because it's not manageable. So those are really the pieces that I think our team is working really hard with to be able to respond to, so that we create a system. As Kelly likes to say, are we building for 3 years, 5 years, or 30? We're building for 30. So we're really looking at sustainability in these systems.
And I knew a little bit of some of the answer to my question. I just wanted them to get it out there. Because I will say, when I look at this team and what they're challenged with, it's change, it's alignment, and we wrote it on the board the other day. We haven't gone through it, with the rest of our team, but it's the amount of things that are coming our way. In addition to the things that we're trying to do correctly, the number of state mandates that are coming our way that are being put in by people that are not knowledgeable about education make it really challenging for our teachers. And I'll say the biggest challenge is time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add.
The staff does not have enough time to try to balance the things we're asking them to do, the state mandates that are coming at them, just the rigor of their own instruction that they have to prepare. And that's why you're seeing staff members at a boiling point of, I don't know which way to look. And we're trying to help them with alignment of systems and I'll say, being good, and you see our test scores, being good sometimes is a barrier to trying to be great. Because we're like, well, why do we have to do this? We're already getting great scores. It's to take that next step and to really get every single student where they need to be. This is the structure we need to do it, and it's hard for people to understand, to help them kind of like break through that wall a little bit. So I know that's the barriers are time and just overall change in general that they're, I would say, when people, you can see it click for people when they sit with this team and it clicks for them, they get it. But, you know, there are only 6-ish plus people here that are working on it, and it takes time. So, you know, other questions that you might have, sorry.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing it. And I remember from the retreat, I probably had a lot of silly questions when you guys presented it, but you know, it seems very complicated it does to me, and I've been here for 8 years, but I appreciate all the work you're doing. I liked the example of the student and the concentric circles and moving out to teams. And it sounds like it's not just about the student, but it's also about giving the teachers and other people the professional development to actually execute these things, as well as looking at our district from a like systems perspective, not necessarily IT, Mr. Long, but a systems perspective. I wanted to go back to the experience that the student has. And because as the, you know, needs or things are identified for that particular student needing, you know, at different levels, who is ultimately responsible for that student? Because, you know, I come from a world where unless somebody is responsible for something, then sometimes those, you know, and in this case, it would be a student kind of falling through the cracks. You know, knowing how wonderful our teachers are, like I can't imagine a student kind of falling through the cracks, but as they sort of go out into more, you know, whether it's the building, whether it's the grade level and then the building and then the, you know, the district team and things like that, who is ultimately responsible for that student?
So I think to answer your question, it's really, you know, the system helps us all be responsible for that student. So when you're looking at a preventative system, although our example started with the individual student, the system in place and how we're looking at data, whether it's the grade level team, the district level team, or the building level team, we're looking at, okay, where are those issues and who is having those issues? Is it a certain, you know, classroom? Is it a certain student that has struggled with X, Y, or Z? You're looking at that, you know, more than just the individual student, because it's preventative. You're not starting with individual problem solving. You're really looking at a system of, okay, attendance, are there any issues there? Discipline, are there any issues there with, you know, students who have, you know, multiple occurrences that are impacting then their academic performance or preventing them from, you know, the outcomes that they're capable of.
I would add that it works. I think sometimes it's easier to understand it when talking about behavior, but that's also where my brain likes to live. So, you know, when I think about it from a prevention and an intervention standpoint, our buildings, because of the legislation around PBIS that came out 8-10 years ago, our buildings have accelerated some of that work more readily. And so they are looking at their building level data and they are identifying, as an example, what are our building level areas of concern? And if we don't have any, then how do we take where our students are behaviorally and accelerate them to be even greater? So as an example, we might look at school-wide behavior data and see right now, we're starting to see some concerns with, in the elementaries, physical touch at recess. Why? Because we've had indoor recess because it's starting to get cold and it's been raining. So we look at that systemically and say, hey, you know what? We might want to go back and reteach some expectations around indoor recess. But yet at recess, kids are doing beautifully. So at outdoor recess. And so we might say, we're ready to introduce new games or new areas of the playground and teach expectations there because they're ready for that next level or that next challenge because they've demonstrated that they can meet expectations. So we look at it that way, but at the same time, we have individual student data that we're looking at and saying these students have a higher volume of staff managed or office managed behaviors. And then we need to dive into how do we look at tier 2 or tier 3 intervention and support for them as well.
Okay, so that's very helpful. I think just one other follow-up, because I think that, you know, the mindset, you know, years ago was sort of, if a student is having trouble in math, you know, that you give them support. If they're having trouble in language arts, you give them support. Can you just expand a little bit on how the process actually moves those students that, let's say, you know, they're doing fine? How do you identify a student or a group of students for enrichment, or to really, you know, it's really about moving everybody on the continuum. It's not just like, well, they're doing well, you know, the student's getting a B in math, so that's fine. We're going to put a check mark by that student. I don't say not worry about them, but they're not as much of a concern as a student who really doesn't understand it. What are we doing specifically in this framework for students and getting them like enrichment and really growing them, would you say? Anybody? I don't know.
I would say it'll come back to that process of the whole child review. So, you know, it's easiest to develop structures for kids that struggle. It is more challenging, but yet you can do structures for students who are doing extremely well and or accelerating already. When we look at whole child review, we are looking at all of those key components and data points. So we're looking at, as an example, what are some of their achievement scores, but then also we may be looking at their social, emotional, and behavioral data and saying, this student is doing beautifully. Because of that set of decision rules, this group of students that met those criteria need the following acceleration. So that's how we work it on the intervention side. As we develop our decision rules, that whole child review will also look at the students that need acceleration.
Okay.
If you think through the concentric circles at that district leadership and that building leadership, we're looking at that collective data. And when we see students who are not moving, because our data will also tell us which students are stagnant. They're only making that expected 1 year's growth, even though their individual scores on some measures may indicate that they can do more. We will be able to parse those pieces out and say that we really need to push that student. That child is just staying very stagnant in their learning, so that when we have those times of intervention, whether that's our win time, NNI, flex time, aviator, whatever we're calling that in those buildings, now we have an opportunity to say, this group of children are not making progress that is expected based on other factors that we've outlined for those students. And so now we're going to give them extension in those areas to make sure that they're growing. And it doesn't mean that you have to go and become gifted, but it may mean that you may need to be accelerated in this area, or we may need to include you in other courses or classes or opportunities to be able to excel in your areas of strength. So we will be able to see that in that district data. And we have already started looking at that and can look at, okay, these kids historically are not growing, or they're making minimal growth, and we know that they have capacity to do more. So that circle that we talked about, it's a backwards and forwards. And that's really the work at that higher level before we're even dealing with individual students at that district and building leadership, is really to be looking at that data holistically. Are our kids meeting their growth measures?
Right.
Are they moving?
Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, I think it goes to Mr. Lewis's point of like, you know, when you're good or you have really, you know, good scores, it's hard to kind of go to that next step, even though it's just it's a hard thing to do, because I don't want to say you want to rest on your laurels, but like it takes a lot, right, to get those good scores, but what does it take to get to that next level? Yes. So it sounds obviously like this framework is actually doing it. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to add, when I listen to this, first of all, it's like, wow, like, this is amazing work that the team is doing to really focus on what's core to this district. And that's going back to our mission and vision. Everything that I'm hearing during this presentation goes right back to how we start all of our meetings, talking about our mission and vision for our students. So thank you for your work. Change is hard, it takes time. And I commend you for your work, and I look forward to the outcomes as we work through the journey.
I also wanted to thank you. I really appreciated the presentation and how you brought it to life with the examples. One of my observations is that even though it says multi-tiered systems of support, I really appreciate how you represented it as rings of support. And I think that's a subtle change, but an important change because it's like surrounding versus, you know, I'll just say,
Progressing.
like,
Ish.
you know,
Even though you're.
like you might think it's a pyramid where you get from one level to the next. Then people who need more support get extra support. And it just doesn't feel as good, I think, as this ring approach that you should probably look at changing the entire industry or the entire MRSS instead of MTSS, because I really like it. The multi-ring system of support is.
That's not real quick.
No, but in all seriousness, my question is fantastic work, but what would help be like from this board? What could we do to help support you? What can we do? Is there anything that you need from us?
I think as we continue this work, because we are really just beginning it and beginning to build our framework, we'll be coming back to you and sharing with you, our progress along the way. And, those barriers that we need to remove or the challenges we need to address, like professional development and coaching and things like that, those are all resources. We're really going to be very mindful about how are those resources fitting into the system and what do we need to make that system work for all of our students. So although we might not be able to answer that specifically today, just know that as we kind of bring you along our journey with us, those things will come up and we'll be very mindful of bringing those to the board.
Yeah, and I would challenge you to bring them back to the board if there's something that you need to move forward or to accelerate this, bring it back to the board.
And that's what that component number 5 is really about. So what are those pieces, the barriers that need to be removed or supports that need to be put into place, identifying them and then advocating.
The other thing that I would say, Mr. Valent, to your point, change is hard. And so for some adults, it's harder than others. It's just kind of your personal, your philosophy and the way that you would approach your work. And so I would just keep that in mind as we look at levels of angst or nervousness among our staff, and just know that this group, our group, is committed to providing the supports that you need through change. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the change curve. Sometimes you're in the bottom of that learning pit and it feels like you're there all by yourself. That number 5 piece is being really strategic about what supports can we place in our system to support the folks through that change. So we're going to be walking that as a partnership with our folks, but just know that you might hear this, there might be some angst because of the changes. And that's just normal.
I'd like to just add that this was excellent presentation. Thank you. It was very informative and helpful. And I think having this conversation frequently is really a good thing, because it just communicates to the board, and to the community and to everyone, the how. I really appreciate how you laid it out. This is why we're doing it. This is how we're doing it. These are, like you said, is this new, or the challenges? What are the things that we already kind of have in place, like PBIS, that, wow, good thing we did that. So now we can kind of layer into that, because that's part of this, right? I like too how you're talking about enrichment. Right? This isn't just intervention. RTI was so much about intervention, right? Like I remember going to presentations years ago on that as a parent. And I think this is just such a better proactive approach. And it was very clear the way you explained it. I think all of you explained this very, very well. But I do believe that we need to do it. I realize you're taking a lot of time today, but I think we're going to have to keep doing this, right? We're going to have
So Mrs. Bitter, it is on the calendar multiple times.
Yeah. So I think that's very good. And I appreciate that. But one actual question that I had was, from the larger system, we can look at groups, we can look at school buildings, we can even look at students, but would we be able to look like individualize it down to like the micro level? So let's say a student needs more, like they kind of fall into that group where they're doing well, but like really they could probably do better, right? And then let's say there are some individualized interventions that occur for that child. Will we be able to see through that data, like this work that did, like, were we able to look and say, and even look at it across, so like multiple students, and then say, you know what? We did the same intervention with 10 students that needed enrichment. It worked for 3 of them, but 7 of them it didn't. And then will we be able to look at it at the micro level?
That structure already exists even
Okay.
within our PBIS
Okay,
work.
yeah,
So that's happening at a regular cadence with teams and
okay.
looking at.
Yeah, so it
groups
becomes
and individual
more,
data.
it becomes more individualized the more you can do that. That's great. Yeah, okay, well, this is excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
That
much.
really helped a lot.
So one last thing, yeah, I just wanted to recognize the principals who are leading, Jane Mino, Jeanette Junk, Mindy Zellner, Jessica Ralston, and Taylor Porter have joined our team this year to help with, our process. So kudos to them for their involvement.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Moving on to superintendent's agenda, we need a motion for the change order for the 2023 Sycamore High School roof replacement project.
Second.
This is a deduct.
So we'll take it.
Money back.
Any questions from the board? Mrs. Logan?
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Hi.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the change order of the Seeger Family and Auditorium project.
So moved.
Second.
This was part of a change that we knew was coming down the pike. It's already been, it was part of the first situation we had to mitigate water in the corner. So this is the second one that was discovered. So we should be good to go. That area's already been filled in. So it was part of our, ongoing PCR logs.
Mrs. Logan, this falls within our contingency budget.
That is correct. On all of our projects, we're in there.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Mrs. Logan?
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Hi.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Fallon.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the change order of Sycamore High School renovation project GMP number 8.
So moved.
Second.
This is actually for the damaged roof at the field house. If you remember, we had the windstorm and the trusses fell. This money has already been recaptured by insurance less than.
Logan?
Mrs. Bitter.
Hi.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the change order of Sycamore High School renovation project GMP number 2.
So moved.
You'll notice that this is related to the pool HVAC controls, but it's coming out of the contingency line in the high school. Now that the high school is coming to an end, we have some money that we have remaining in that area. So this actually is going to help us get back and better control of the HVAC system tied to the entire building. So this is going to help us with our energy efficiency down the line. So we thought that this would be a good step at this point, understanding the fiscal health of the overall budget at the high school.
Questions? Mrs. Logan, please call roll.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the change order of Sycamore High School renovation project GMP number 5.
So moved.
Second.
Just another credit.
Mrs. Logan?
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye, motion passes. Mr. Lewis, enrollment.
Yes, just a quick update. Our current enrollment right now, 5,993 students. Last year at this time, 5,747 students. So, a net of close to 250 students plus. So, again, when we look at our enrollment, and you look at 250 students across 13 grades, as they spread out, that's not an extreme amount for any particular building. So I would say the largest bubble that we're seeing is at the intermediate school age level right now. There's kind of a large bubble there. I know there were some talk out in the district about Sims. Sims was built for the largest capacity out of all of our elementary schools. So the other component I would say is that we have to remember that we have I'll say a Sycamore class caps, not any official contractually bargained class caps that also create space constraints because of the way we believe that we should do classes. So our enrollment study, I have a meeting next week to look at where we are in the enrollment study and, give some preliminary feedback so that we can bring that to conclusion. Once that is to conclusion, we'll be back in front of you with a full presentation to talk about, what is it telling us? What does our future enrollment look like? Or predicted enrollment look like? And, what are some decisions that we might have to make? So, but as of right now, I would say from a district standpoint, I don't have any concerns. When we went through the master facility plan, we were building for, and we talked about a capacity of 6,100. So, we're not there yet, but we're getting close. But I think the biggest thing is the bubble that we're experiencing in the 5-6 grade band is, a little more intense than maybe we predicted that would be coming. But I am so thankful that as we work through that process, we built, if you remember, the additional classrooms that were built between the wings. That was a great decision because we're being able to accommodate those additional pressures without any issues. So.
Mr. Lewis, do you anticipate the enrollment study at the December evening meeting or no?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
So I haven't gotten, it's just been constant check-ins and answering questions. You know how these processes are very thorough and there's all kinds of I'll just say random questions that factor in. So I feel like we've gotten to the bottom of all of the questions. Now it's what are your initial findings? And I think it's more of presenting those findings to a small group of us that are very knowledgeable about kind of all the things and it's crazy, but you start talking about neighborhoods and elementary boundaries and all of those things to make sure it's all correct before we come for a kind of a full presentation. But you know how it is. It'll be very thorough. It'll be very intense and it'll be a lot of information to take in at once. But I think in the long run, I know Mr. Lovell and I are very excited about, okay, how does this impact our decision making? And it's been a while since we've had a long-term look at our enrollment. So this will be very helpful and I appreciate the board giving us that permission to move that forward. So.
I have one just general question. So based on the enrollment data and the enrollment study, can you just tell us what it'll inform us and give us information, but then what actions, what is on the menu potential options that we could do? What does that entail?
Well, if our enrollment continues to climb, one of the things that we'll have to look at is, two things really. Looking at our unofficial class caps and moving above those unofficial class caps because they're not official in any way. That's one option because there is no research or data out there that says smaller class sizes equals better instruction. The second thing is redistricting. If we have a particular building that the growth looks like it's going to exceed the space that we have, then we might have to shuffle some students. And I think we always try to not have to do that, but that's a realistic. We can't control where people move to or where they build or where our cities build apartment complexes. We try to anticipate and plan, but it's not a perfect science. So we just have to wait and look and see what those numbers look like. And it's the predictability of how many, it really comes down to how many births, how many kindergartners, who's moving into the area and then what that does to that attendance area. And it's mostly across, obviously, the 4 elementary buildings.
What is the general turnaround? So let's say we said, okay, we get this information and we're all right, we definitely need to either option, but let's say redistrict. What is the turnaround time for us as a district to do such a thing?
I mean, realistically, you'd like to have, it just depends on the urgency that is in the data. So I would say realistically, I would like to have more like a year's worth of time to be able to roll that out to community members. Unfortunately, I've had to walk through redistricting a number of times. But if we only have to move a few areas or students, I think it's less impactful than looking at Dr. James, because in 2014, we had to move major neighborhoods. Actually, looking at Mr. Ballant, because I remember that was one of the reasons that he started attending board meetings, was one of the major neighborhoods was his neighborhood being looked at to be moved from one elementary to another. And we had a lot of engagement, didn't we, Dr. James?
But I think, and Mr. Bitter, I think, one thing, obviously we don't want to redistrict very often. And, I think 2014 was the last major redistricting we've done. But the enrollment study will look at, births that have occurred that, these kids aren't even in our buildings yet. So we'll see if there's more kids coming in, we'll see where they currently live, and we'll see, we'll have that data to make a more informed decision over not just a 1-year picture, but a 4 or 5 year picture.
I think that's the theme. That's why you do an enrollment study, is you want to be proactive and not reactive. You don't want to have the building overflowing before you see the issue.
Absolutely. No, but I'm curious just to know, like, what, to be informed of what the process, how long it takes, should you have to react, but yes, you don't want to ever have to react, you want to be able to plan for that.
Yeah, and just to add, if I can, I think the enrollment study gives us the data to ask the questions, just like everything else we do. But there are multiple levers that can be pulled as well to ease issues. So from our standpoint, from an operations standpoint, it's looking at the space, how the space is being utilized, to Mr. Lewis's point, how many kids are in a class, the program, all that kind of stuff. So it gives us the ability to take a step back, ask the right questions, and then tackle and say, these are the levers that we think we need to pull based on what the data said. So that takes a while, because that takes a lot of discussion, conversation to determine what are those right things. And that some of those may be a board decision, some of them just may be operational.
Just to be proactive, we're not planning redistricting right now. We're waiting for information.
I'm only
in a
asking.
study.
Be clear, Mr. Allen, be clear. Can I just ask because I'm
No.
informed?
I think they're great questions, but I don't want the public
I know,
to think,
no one needs to.
like
I'm just asking.
we've already made the decision to read it.
Well, and I would say the same thing to our staff, we always try to observe those unofficial class caps, because I think we believe in that in Sycamore, so I don't want people to listen to this and go run off and say, oh, they're gonna raise class caps and we're gonna cut staffing. That's not what we're talking about. We just want to do an analysis of the data right now. So get to a place that we can make good decisions based on the data. Really, I feel like we're in the MTSS structure and framework.
That's correct. Being proactive.
We have a great.
Active approach.
We have a great school district, we have beautiful new buildings, people are moving to our district, it's great, but we have to be able to have a conversation as a board in a public session and have these conversations. I think it's healthy, it's good, it's positive, it doesn't.
No, I think it's gonna be a great study and a great topic.
Okay, I'll keep you updated. I should be able to give you an update of when I anticipate that presentation to happen.
Okay, so thank you. Moving on to item G, modification to the 23-24 school calendar.
So speaking of additional time, the item, the reason this is on the agenda is April 8th, 2024 is the solar eclipse. If you were around during the last solar eclipse, it creates a lot of, I'll just say, unrest in the school district. We were dealing with people coming in and taking their kids out early. People afraid, keeping their kids home for the day, all these different things. And I don't know if it's just because it's something different and new, but it created a lot of unrest. So as someone on our team brought it up that this was coming, we started discussing, what options do we have? And it's all the options from, do we have indoor recess that day? Do we not allow people to go out? Do we buy glasses to allow them to view the solar eclipse? Are we concerned about the safety of kids going home on the bus and not having eye protection and looking up and, causing damage to their eyes? So we have all these things that are going on. But at the end of that discussion, we also are talking and hearing that there are other districts, and I think it was just within our league, that are already saying, we're just not gonna have school that day, we're gonna make other arrangements. And so as I had discussions with our internal team, with our union president, Mrs. Grace, just trying to hear all the feedback, I think the overwhelming theme when I've gone around to buildings is this would be a great opportunity for staff to receive this day as a professional learning day where they could do some additional work, whether it be, dyslexia modules, whether it be Canvas training, whether it be, some work around the MTSS structure. But we would bring staff in, have them do this work. April 8th is actually a Monday. And I think it's actually after a weekend where we may have Friday off that weekend, but none of those things factor in as much as just I'll say the significant unrest. I don't know what the educational quality was back when we had the last solar eclipse because of all the disruption that we were experiencing. So I would just, if the board would be willing to entertain it, I would love the board to consider making that day a professional learning day and making a modification to our calendar. I'm very happy to bring this back in January if you feel that the next board should be the one making this decision. The reason I brought it now is that this current board approved the 23-24 calendar. So, but happy to do it either way. There's no urgency around it other than I think communicating proactively to families and letting them know that that's going to be an alteration. And if there's no desire by the board to do this, we will figure out a plan to have school that day. So I would just say I'm advocating for it to be a professional learning day. I think that's what's best for our school district based on all the feedback I've collected, but I think we will make it work no matter what we have to entertain. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, the last eclipse was just a partial one. So we are almost a full eclipse here.
Right.
Which is only happening, I don't think it's happening again for another almost 80 years. As a parent who had kids in the district for the partial, some teachers pulled the blinds because they were trying for safety reasons not to protect their kids, so where the kids didn't get to experience it. I don't particularly have a problem having a professional development day. I like the idea of I don't want to give the day off for our staff. I want them to have the opportunities to grow professionally and to learn and to do all the things we just talked about. I do think a lot of kids would be out because it's a full eclipse, and I think families would enjoy spending time watching this event with their kids.
I do want to ask the question, and I'm fine for this to be tabled for the next board to decide, really. I'm really fine with that. But my question is, why would it not be a day off for our staff as well? What I mean by that is it's like a momentous day, 80 years, and I appreciate the need for professional development, but I'm just trying to understand why would it's like we choose for the students to have the experience and the teachers and the staff to be in a workshop, which is valuable, but this is a once in an 80-year event. I'm just curious the logic behind that.
I will say, as I talked within our internal team, we hear the desire and need for more time. So we looked at it as an opportunity for that time to be available for them to complete some of this work. I will say and I hadn't thought of it the way you just thought of it, so I appreciate your perspective. I will say the other aspect when I discussed this was my concern about the perception from taxpayers that have to go to work, that don't get to experience it, feeling like that the school district made this decision to allow their tax dollars to be spent and that they were not at work.
Or maybe you could look at a hybrid approach too. I don't think it's occurring till later in the afternoon, 3 or 4, something like that.
I think I'd be very open to
professional development up until a certain time and then having.
I think that's a great perspective.
And I mean, I would think about it in the way that you would any weather phenomenon. When we close for snow, we don't have professional learning during a snowstorm. So anyway, that's just
a great point.
And I support what you're requesting. If that's what your feeling is professionally, that's what we should do. I support what you decide. I think the key though is early as possible for families to plan that.
Right.
So the sooner we can make that known, the better, because people need to, if they're working and they need to secure childcare or just giving people as much advance notice, the better, right? That would be and I do agree with you, Mr. Comerford, on if it is, I actually didn't realize I knew there was an eclipse coming, I didn't know when it was, but I agree, if it's a really special scientific moment, letting people have that experience and keeping I agree with that, you just said with your sentiment. I'm open, I'm pretty flexible on this one.
So is there any preference of bringing it back at the next meeting or taking it into January? Because it'll just delay the communication.
I think we just do it at the next meeting. I don't see any doing it this meeting versus waiting.
I think it's like you said, it's a 1 in 80 year event or whatever. Hopefully most families will use it as a learning opportunity for their kids, so.
But I agree with Mrs. Bitter that the more advanced notice you give families, the better.
And I'm fine either way, I really.
I don't mind, I don't have any preference on timing, I think just earlier better. Right.
Thank you for entertaining that discussion. Mr. Rice, you have something?
Yeah, I know it's so silly, but so if that is gonna be a day off for everyone, staff and students, do we need to then put another day contractually for the teachers? How does that work?
If we're considering it like a weather event, I don't think so.
Considering it a calamity day.
Right, if it's a calamity day, then we would not have to.
Which,
wanna make
and I'll
sure
check with
we're
Dave to see
Yeah.
if we are gonna consider it like a calamity day, I'm not even sure any boards vote on it. So I'll double check that and see what we.
Okay.
It's a good point.
Thanks.
It's a good point.
I need a motion for the approval of donation
So, second.
comments.
Yeah, so this is, the Jose Sierra Aquatic Foundation has been a huge supporter of the work that we're doing over at the natatorium. Gosh, it was back, when was the event?
Beginning of the year.
Beginning of the year, there was an event downtown, it was phenomenal, the foundation, it was over the summer. And this donation was a result of that effort, so we are thrilled to be able to accept the donation. We're also going to be, at a future board meeting, you'll be getting a change order as we start to work towards signage at the high school. It's kind of the remaining package that we've been working towards, and part of that is honoring both the Always the Aviator campaign in general, but also in the aquatic center. So we're proud to be able to have the Jose Sierra Foundation on that board to signify the amount of effort that they put towards the fundraising components with Mr. Seaver.
Mrs. Logan?
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Ballin.
Aye. Motion passes. Louis, moving on to other.
Yeah, just it's a busy time right now with concerts and winter sports starting. So, but a couple of things that the high school, I really appreciate the high school team. They had a thank you or an 8th grade night, inviting some of our 8th grade families into the high school, took them on tours, had a senior panel to give them information about why they would want to select Sycamore High School for their experience. And these are 8th graders that are considering parochial school or private schools or other opportunities in Sycamore High School. I think we had about 40 families there. It was well attended. They had some meals and got to hear from our seniors. I thought what was unique is there were a couple of seniors that had gone to parochial school and came to Sycamore. One in particular, Emma, who spent her senior year with us and said it's been the most phenomenal year of her high school experience. So I really appreciated hearing those students that had experienced the parochial school education. And she said, I loved my experience at Mount Notre Dame, but the one here is unmatched. So I thought that was really positive. We have lots of concerts. Winter choir concert was at the high school was November 28th. Junior high choir was last night. I got to watch my own son sing and dance. So his younger brother got to razz him for the singing and dancing.
Does he have moves like his father?
He does not. Not yet. Maybe he's developing it. So EH Green Band is tonight. And then our high school choirs are performing with the Pops December 8th through the 10th at Music Hall, so.
And also, just on that note, I think that it's being live streamed. So if you didn't, or if you're not able to get tickets, I think you can watch it online.
I went last year, it's phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's
It
amazing.
was amazing.
Yes.
And then,
Yes.
let's see, Montgomery had their theater performance, Frozen Kids. So it was a lot of fun. I went on, I think it was Friday night. And my son Hayden went with me and it was great. It was a great experience, lots of families. Mr. Wapham should be very excited because there was a lot of talent on that stage, a lot of singing, a lot of dancing, so. Our fourth grade youth football, 2023 Rocky Top Central National Champions. They were 28-5 over the last 2 years.
Wow.
So, last couple of concerts that are out there, December 11th, Sims will have their fourth grade winter concert at Sims Elementary. Our high school orchestras are on December 12th, the junior high orchestras are on December 13th, and the high school bands are on December 14th. So I will say I have to give a huge shout out to Mr. Wapham and his team, and just, with the junior high theater still needing to be completed. Mr. Wapham has been phenomenal of making sure that every group gets equal access to the theater and makes it a great experience. So I know it's getting overworked, and I'm sure the team up there is doing a great job and making sure that those events happen. So the other thing I wanted to mention in my other items is, before the meeting, we got to recognize Mrs. Combs and her pending retirement. Obviously upcoming on the personnel consent agenda. My colleague, Mrs. Wegner, will be submitting her resignation for retirement. And I will just say that I have never worked with someone that I've learned so much from. I will completely miss you, and you are not getting away from long phone calls and drive home and talking to you and Gus. Her husband Gus gives the best advice.
He's the best ever. He is the best ever.
So you're not getting away from those phone calls, but I would not be the person that I am. I wouldn't be the father that I am, and I certainly wouldn't be the administrator that I am without knowing you. And I can honestly say this, I wouldn't be in this job without two people in this room. Dr. James, because she originally hired me, and you, because I was pretty set on never applying for the job, and you said that's the wrong answer. That's correct. And talked me into why I should apply. So I just will miss your support. I'll miss your guidance on all aspects of life. But again, you're not that far away.
Nope.
I know I have a room at the Wagners if I need to stay.
Correct. That's correct.
But I do want to leave you space. This is
Yeah.
your personal retirement, and I wanted to be able to let you have some space on the agenda to talk.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am so thankful for the time that I've spent with the Sycamore family. The entire Sycamore staff and everything that they do for kids every day and being so student focused has been a huge blessing for me. My decision to retire is not a Sycamore thing, it's a family thing. My dad his health is declining and I want to be with him. So it's really that personal family decision that leads me, but I'm so thankful for the board, for your support over the years, and to be able to partner with you in service to our community has been a blessing. I'm so thankful for the teachers. I know that none of them are looking because they're working and teaching right now and doing all the things. But the opportunity to partner with them and to work collaboratively to do the best we can for the kids that are in front of us, that's been phenomenal. And I will truly miss that collaboration piece. I thank Chad. I echo what Leslie said about your leadership. I'm so thankful for the atmosphere that you have created within our administrative team, and how you empower us to lead. And you get out of the way when you need to get out of the way, for lack of a better term. And I really appreciate that. Most of all though, this administrative team, these folks here at district office, but also our building administrators are unmatched. They're amazing people, as you guys know. The collaborative spirit between district office and our buildings has just really, again, filled my collaborative, down in the weeds, working with people's soul. The genuine support and care with which we treat each other really echoes the home team thing. And so you all have made me better as a person, me better as an educator, me better as a leader. And I won't be that far away, I promise. So thank you. I just appreciate it.
You're always welcome.
I'm just very thankful.
Thank you, Kelly, again, on behalf of the board, the district, the community, our students, for everything you've done. I mean, I was on the board when you came, and I knew from day one, this lady knows what she's talking about. She's passionate about what she does, and the energy that she brings, that you bring every day to everything that you do has been amazing. It is not a coincidence that the academic achievement of our district has gone up with you here. And I thank you for that. We will miss you, but I can certainly understand why you're retiring, and wish you nothing but the best in retirement.
Thank you.
I just want to echo those kind words, Kelly. It has truly been a pleasure to have the opportunity to work with you, get to know you, and the difference that you have made here at this school district. You are truly leaving a legacy, and you should be very proud of the work that you were able to accomplish, and the friendships and the kindness and the energy and the passion that you bring to the role on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for your leadership. You have really been a very good role model for our district. And I really appreciate that. And I understand taking time for your family, being able to give that gift to your family is really important. I value that a lot as well. And I thank you for everything you've done for our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that.
Kelly, I don't want to cry. I too was here when you were brought in, and I thought to myself when you started, I thought, God, who is this firecracker? And
But every day.
But I'm so quiet.
In addition to having a great sense of humor and just command of so many things in education, curriculum, and working with people, I think that you personify collaboration, which is so important in this district. And everyone that you work with, I think you make a better leader. And I have learned a lot from you, not just about things of education and curriculum, but also in how to be a leader and how you interact with people. And you are very good at setting your own limits in terms of what you will tolerate and what you won't. And it's been very inspirational to me. So thank you so much for all of your service to the district, and we will have to go get some French fries before. Thank you so much.
So we have 6 more months with her, so we're not anywhere yet.
Right.
We will have the opportunity to celebrate in the spring with both Leslie and Kelly.
We still have work to do.
We still have work to do, so. Okay, moving on to item J on superintendent's agenda, and which was a motion to authorize Brad Lovell, Director of Business Operations, to execute a change order with Monarch Construction pending SHP's approval of a settlement agreement at an amount not to exceed $2.65 million for the junior high school construction project.
So moved.
Second.
Slogan.
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye, motion passes. I need a motion for the approval of the personnel consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Logan.
Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye, motion passes. On to the treasurer's agenda. Mrs. Logan.
And I only have one thing to just kind of make you aware of, no action required, but I received notification from the city of Blue Ash that their city council will be considering on their December 14th meeting to extend the TIF for the landings for an additional 30 years. So by law, it's already a 30-year tip. You can extend it for another 30 years. And so they have given us the notice. If you choose to attend that meeting, or if you know, you have any reservations or whatever, they're letting us know that that's coming up. So I have the actual notification, which I will be sending to all of you in an email so you can see the entirety of it. It includes the resolution that they will be considering as well. And that's it.
Can you say the date again?
Yes, it's December 14th. I do not have.
Now that will be brought back to the board for vote.
So because it is more than 10 years and this will need to come to the school district for approval. So this is like that first step. Right.
So then would we anticipate the December evening meeting that we would discuss this?
I will reach out to the city and find out if they believe that they'll be able to give us that resolution that we would be considering that quick of a turnaround. I'll ask, but because I'm between there. I'll find out.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Logan. Other Board of Education business, OSBA conference recap, and I believe Mrs. Bitter.
Yes, we had our Ohio School Board Association conference on November 12th through the 14th, and our administrative team, our entire administrative team, Mr. Harris, Dr. James, and I traveled to Columbus to attend the OSBA conference. We had many opportunities for learning, for sharing, networking. It's a great event that we go to every year. We attended several seminars on a broad spectrum of public educational topics. Our school district presented as well. We also received a legislative update with a panel of Ohio State House staffers, Ohio legislators who discussed the future of education in Ohio. I actually got to hear personally from Governor DeWine, who attended the annual business meeting of the OSBA Delegate Assembly. That was a very good speech. He spoke about the science of reading. That was his subject. So that was great to be able to hear it straight from the mouth of our governor. And he also discussed the transfer of the Ohio Department of Education to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, which will be something that we as a school district are impacted by for years to come. If you ever would like to learn, any of the board members here, or any of our future board members would like to learn about the information at the conference, we actually received handouts in all of our presentations. There's some great PowerPoint slides that covering a broad spectrum of information. So I'm happy to share that
You
link
can forward
with
it
you.
electronically?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can, if there's,
Please.
there's like, there's so many of them. I guess I need to probably screenshot or give you an example of the subjects, and then you can tell me, 'cause it's a lot.
Okay.
Or, yeah, we'll figure out how to do that. In addition to attending the conference, I'm mostly saying this for our new board members, in case you don't already know this. Dr. James, you probably already know this, but you can receive your own policy legislative updates. You can just get an email update from various educational related agencies. So if you want to get more information, then they'll send it to your school board email. That's what I do. I know that's what Mrs. Weiss does and other board members. So please feel free to do that. It's very informative. The Ohio Department of Education Workforce is going to be drafting administrative rules, which will also impact our district, and they will be soliciting feedback. So I think that's something that we may want to be looking at, Mrs. Logan, just moving forward, so that if we want to weigh in on that, I'm sure with the treasurers and superintendents associations, you'll already be getting information on that, but just a heads up. And I'm happy to send anyone information on how to subscribe to those newsletters and or give you some handouts from the conference itself. That's my update from the conference.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item B, board PTO visits. It is that starting to be that time of year. I've reached out to PTO presidents, and some proactively reached out to me as well to start to schedule them. I will be reaching out to board members and newly elected board members. to see who's available. There are a couple dates coming up in January, the 11th at Sims and the 19th at the high school. So we'll get some topics put together, elaborate on what topics we're going to speak about, and then see which board members are able to attend. We do this so that we can go to the PTO organizations and talk about what the board does, some of the topics that the board is currently working on, introduce the board, and then really answer questions that they may have. It's a great time with the PTO, very interactive and collaborative and very informative as well. So I'll be sending an email out to the board members to see who could attend these sessions.
Well, and and it's just a thought I had in my head as you spoke, but just something that I think the board should consider. You know, I feel like when we have new staff, new people, like it's a great opportunity to kind of do a meet whatever night, like meet the superintendent, meet the treasurer. Maybe it's a meet the team night, you know, where, and I don't know how, we probably have to do it in a board meeting type format that's a little less formal, but I'm just thinking of ways that we've talked about engaging the community. You know, instead of just rotating around to PTOs, having a night where we're all there, we're present, and we're not, whether it be a town hall type format or something, maybe we can kind of develop that. But I'm just thinking with new people coming on, and, you know, I think it'd be a great opportunity to just be somewhere and be present and see what.
Yeah, I think we can work it into our, you know, we're looking at communication and how we reach out to the community. So I think we can work on doing that.
And I think also for our new members, for the PTO visits, we just have some notes that we sometimes use at our meetings, just to make sure we're covering all of the areas that are important to us as a board and the administrative team. So we may want to revisit that and look at that and just make sure that we have all the things on there that are current. Because I know every year, you know, little things change. So I think that'd be good for us to do as well.
The last item is to set our date and time for the 2024 organizational meeting. Typically, we meet on the first Wednesday of the month. However, that's the third, which we're not in school at that time. So I'm proposing that we meet on January 10th at 7 o'clock for our organizational meeting. Open to discussions around that. That would be to swear in the new members, to talk about meeting schedules and what the officers and committee assignments. Does that work?
That would work for me.
So we will go ahead and set that on January 10th at 7 o'clock.
And administrative team, is that okay for you?
Actually,
you're on.
I will say thank you for making it, because the last thing I wanted was to have people come in, if they're taking off on the 3rd, to come in to go to a board meeting.
Right.
Really care about our team getting some time away and enjoying some time with families, so.
Okay, I need a motion to go into executive session for ORC 121.22. Consider the employment compensation of a public employee, investigation charge for complaints against a public employee, and ORC 121.22G5 to discuss matters required to be kept confidential with federal law, the regulations, or state statute. Do not anticipate a vote, so we will, when we come out of the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Mrs. Logan?
Mrs. Weiss.
Aye.
Mrs. Bitter.
Aye.
Mr. Comerford.
Aye.
Mr. Ballant.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.